A former Facebook employee says Trump's own mastery of the Facebook ad platform may have had the greatest influence of all. Writing in Wired magazine, plotting Russians make for a good story, and external enemies frequently serve an internal purpose. But the trail of blame often leads much closer to home. It's right there, topped by a big blue bar on our smartphone screens, and could very well be how you arrived at what you're reading right now. To explain, I want to bring in the author of that piece, Antonio Garcia Martinez, contributing writer at Wired, also a former product manager for Facebook, worked on the ads team, and the author of Chaos Monkeys, Obscene Fortune and Random Failure in Silicon Valley. Great to have you here on the show.
Having me.
So explain what you mean by that.
Well, I mean, I wrote this piece precisely because there was so much fanfare about the Russia thing, and I knew as a marketer that Trump's use of Facebook ads, specifically some of the products I had worked on, is really how he won the election. So that's what effectively is what my piece is about.
There was a lot of conversation about this over the weekend, and basically the bottom line is that Hillary Clinton had to pay a lot more for ad space than Donald Trump did, correct?
At the end of the day, that's exactly right. And I get into exactly how that happened, but yeah, that's the story.
Trump's digital campaign advisor was also tweeting over the weekend saying, I bet we were 100 times to 200 times her. We had CPMs that were pennies in some cases. This is why Trump was a perfect candidate for Facebook.
That's right.
The bottom line is that Facebook gives you more ad space or cheaper ads if they think your ads are going to be more engaging.
Right, and by engaging we mean basically clickbait, like bait, comment bait, whatever suits the sort of action that it's optimizing for, you effectively get cheaper media for driving that sort of engagement.
So why would Trump ads be more engaging?
Well, if you believe that the political rhetoric from his party is a sort that engages people in a very excitable and indignant way, that would spread easier on the actual ad system.
Do you think it's okay for Hillary Clinton to pay more for ads than Donald Trump?
And that's a great question. There's a lot of election law, and I'm not a campaign lawyer, but in general, that is a problem legally. You know, there's equal time rules on TV. There's questions of in-kind donations by certain networks to certain candidates. It's strange. It's weird. I mean, here's the reality. The Facebook ad system was designed to sell you a pair of shoes or a sweater. It wasn't designed to elect the president of the United States.
Right, but that changed a long time ago.
Not as long as you might think. I was the targeting PM in 2012 in the last election, and frankly, politics was not really a priority at all at the time.
So the big question is, what is the responsibility that Facebook bears here?
That's a good question. Yeah, I mean, I think to the extent that only one side exploits Facebook, it does seem deeply unfair. I think following this election, I think both sides will pay a lot more attention to Facebook going forward.
You explore some of the ethics of this in your book, and you allude to it in your piece. How much were conversations about ethics part of what you talked about at Facebook? I mean, does this come up on the minds of ad product managers? Oh,
it absolutely does. I mean, probably 10% of my time there was spent with lawyers, wondering about privacy ethics and law. And the weird thing is, in the U.S., there actually isn't a lot of regulation around it. So it basically comes down to industry practice, which is something we made up as we went along, effectively. So,
what do you imagine is happening inside Facebook right now?
Oh, I'm sure they're thinking deeply about this. I mean, on the one hand, they're shutting down the Russia thing, right? The whole, ad filtering and ad policing is going to be a lot more aggressive going forward than it is now. You won't be able to just enter a credit card in Russia, pay in rubles with a Russian IP address, and just target swing state voters in Ohio. I'm pretty sure that's not going to be the case going forward. I think some of the bigger questions are, how does the ad system change to not necessarily preference or prefer engaging content, and also on the organic side, right? A lot of the Russian efforts were not paid. It wasn't ads, actually. It was just spreading memes. How do you actually shut down those memes? That's a much, much harder problem, I think, for Facebook.
That's exactly what Rob Goldman was trying to point out in his tweets, which the president then retweeted. But, don't you think Facebook's trying to shirk some of their responsibility here?
Yeah, I think that's right. I think broadly in the media space, you're seeing the death of editorship, right? Someone telling you need to read this thing because it's important, and it becomes an algorithmic popularity contest, which is what I called it. That's what democracy has become. And the like button is the new ballot box in a way. So will Facebook actually embrace that responsibility? I'm not sure. I think they really don't want it, to be honest.
But they have it already, is the point.
That's exactly the thing. They have a job they don't want. That's right. That's exactly right.
So another line from your piece. We've all contributed to this political balkanization of self-sorting or being sorted by Facebook into online tribes that get morphed into filter bubbles, which are then studiously colonized by commercial means.
Right.
How much responsibility do you think Facebook bears for the election of Donald Trump?
I think it was one part of the puzzle, but I don't think it's everything that ails us right now as a body politic, right?
Which leads to my next question. How much responsibility does Facebook bear for the divisiveness of our country?
It's the megaphone on the yelling. I think it does bear some responsibility.
So if there is some responsibility there, then how does Facebook grapple with that? What does Facebook change in order to rise to that responsibility?
I mean, long term, if you're asking me to guess what's going to happen going forward, I think political ads will be regulated very differently on Facebook and will exist completely separately from all our other ads. This business of Hillary paying more than Trump for the same ad is probably not going to happen going forward. And if they have to pull that completely out of the ads auction, which is the key thing. That might be one of the things.
So you do see regulation coming?
Or potentially self-regulation. But effectively, the way things are done now will not be the case going forward.
That's interesting, given that people in power benefit from the way things are right now.
Right. This would be calling the current administration to actually regulate the practices that put itself in power. That's right.
Does Twitter, you also, Twitter bought one of your companies.
That's right, yeah.
Does Twitter have a comparable problem in ad targeting?
They have a similar product. It's called tailored audiences instead of custom audiences. It sounds very artisanal. But yeah, it's to the extent they use that, they would have the same issue.
So, we can imagine that a Hillary Clinton campaign would probably pay more for the same amount of real estate than a Donald Trump campaign?
I'm not deeply familiar with their ad system. I can't venture a guess. But this sort of paradigm of judging bids by engagement is very common. Actually, Google came up with it, was the sort of big first player to do it. Facebook did not invent this at all. This is actually industry practice in many ways. Yeah.
So rather than answering what will happen, because we don't know for sure, but what do you think Facebook should do differently?
Well, I think, the policing of ads, right? Just last week, they announced they're going to send little postcards to people on their address of their political advertiser to make sure that's actually what their address actually is. And they're actually in Columbus, Ohio, and not St. Petersburg. So that's one step. I think they're going to crank down, again, like I said, on those advertisers a lot. So it's going to be a big deal to run political ads on Facebook. You're going to need basically a license to do it. And then secondly, I think is the other thing. They're probably going to set aside inventory for various campaigns and just say, look, you're going to pay the same amount for the same people in the same swing states, and just like TV does, by the way, and sets aside whatever it is, 5-10% of the inventory, and says, this is what goes to this campaign, this is what goes to this campaign, and that's it.
Mark Zuckerberg has said they're going to start showing more status updates from friends and family rather than news. I got asked this question. I didn't know quite how to answer it, but do you think the intentions of Facebook are good? The people who run Facebook are good?
Yeah, I've said it before. Like this whole business of a more open and connected world, they actually believe that. The question is that sometimes they either frame that or don't see the the negative consequences of what they do. Again, at the time, we were thinking of having a company like Bed Bath & Beyond sell you bath towels, not Trump win the White House. And I think it's a little bit difficult to envision that when you're kind of intoxicated inside the somewhat cult-like culture of the company and just trying to push that ball forward without imagining the negative consequences of what you did. I mean, if you had told me in 2012 that the products we were building would be used by Kremlin agents potentially to subvert American democracy, I would have laughed in your face, right? And yet, here we are, it's 2018.
Nobody's laughing now.
Right.